Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today I want to talk about glue. You know, in part 1 of this series on ballasting, we talked about ways to apply the ballast to the track and the roadbed. Now, once you get through applying it, you need to somehow stabilize it on the ties and on the roadbed itself. Otherwise, every time you bump up against the layout or just the standard vibration of the trains and the cars running across the layout, it's going to make that ballast move, and it's going to get all over the place. It's going to end up in your scenery. It's eventually going to end up in the gears of your locomotive, and in general, it's not a really good idea to just leave it sitting there floating free on the track. Glue is what we want to use. Now there's a number of different companies that make ballast cement and scenery cement with various types of glues in it. Personally, I don't use any of those because it's cheaper in the long run, I think, to simply make your own. So what goes into ballast cement and how do you make it up yourself? Well, let's take a quick look. One popular one is Elmer's Glue All. It's a multi-purpose glue. It's primarily a polyvinyl acetate, or PVA for short, glue. Elmer's is a very popular one though for making scenery and ballast cement. I use a product called Podge, and I got this gallon jug at a decent price. I think I got it for half price at one of the local craft stores in the US called Michael's, and they periodically put out these half-price coupons, so I went over there and bought a whole jug of it at half price. Now the great thing about Podge is, like the Elmer's Glue All, it is a PVA cement, and it is water soluble when it's wet, but it dries to a fairly water resistant form. The other great thing about it is Podge comes in a number of different formulations. You can get it glossy, you can get it absolutely flat, or you can get the matte version, which is what I use. And that dries to a matte finish. So let's talk about how you go about making up something that you can use. What I do is I mix it up in this 16-ounce bottle that used to have isopropyl alcohol in it. More about alcohol in a minute here. But basically, I use 1 part matte medium, the Podge, to 3 parts water, plus about 4 drops of dishwashing liquid. And you get something that will flow quite easily. Now, one of the problems with putting a wet product like glue on ballast is it has a hard time penetrating, because this stuff, I use a fine ballast, and it can be kind of hard for it to flow down into the particles. So what you need to, and the reason for that is water has what's called surface tension. You probably remember that from your high school or chemistry classes in college. And surface tension is the ability of water, or the tendency of water molecules to cling to one another. That's why I add a little bit of detergent to my mixture. And what that does is it breaks up the surface tension of the water molecules enough so they tend to flow in. However, if you apply dilute glue like this to dry ballast, even with the detergent added to it, or the soap added to it, it still won't flow readily down into the dry material. Consequently, what has traditionally been used is something called wet water. And wet water simply consisted of plain old tap water with a few drops of detergent or soap added to it. And it breaks up the water, the surface tension of the water molecules in the water, making it wet, and it will flow down into your roadbed and your scenery material, everything else. The good thing about that is, once those products and surfaces are wet all the way through, your scenic cement and glue, dilute glue, will readily flow into them and saturate the whole thing. Something that has become very popular recently, though, is plain old 70% isopropyl alcohol. You can pick it up at the local drugstore. I got it at the CVS drugstore or pharmacy, as they call themselves now. You can get it at grocery stores throughout North America. You can probably get it at the chemist or the grocery stores in Europe. So it's very easy to acquire. It's not overly expensive. And it does two things. It will flow readily down into your ballast and in your scenery material and wet it thoroughly throughout. As a result, once you then apply your glue, dilute glue to it, and scenery cement, whatever you choose to use, then this will flow down readily into the ballast itself and wet it thoroughly. And then when it dries, all of the ballast is going to be firmly held in place. I use these little 7 milliliter transfer pipettes. I got these off eBay a few years ago. I think I bought a box of 500 of them for about $18, something in that realm. And they're still available. I checked yesterday and they're still available on eBay. Look for 7 milliliter transfer pipettes. You can buy these at your local hobby shop. You can probably get 5 for $1 or $2. I use these for a lot of different things. They're great for applying your alcohol or wet water. They're great for applying ballast cement to your ballast. And I use them for mixing paints. And, you know, I've got 500 of them in a box in there. So I just throw them away once they get pretty grungy. So when you're going to apply your wet water or your alcohol, it's a simple matter to just take it up in the syringe and apply it. Another way of applying both the wet water or the alcohol and the glue is these rubber bulb type things that are made for washing out your ears, okay, basically. And what you can do is just pull your solution up into the bulb and then dribble it out slowly. And that works very well. I've used this for a lot of my ballasting. Something I've recently purchased, though, is this ketchup bottle. And then I added a section of pipette tip here to give a little bit finer control with it because it tended to flow out quite readily out of here. And I won't turn it upside down now because it will flow out of here quite easily. But it's a large volume, so if you're doing a lot of ballasting, instead of using one of these or one of these, it works great to have a large reservoir like this one here that you can just flow out all over a large expanse of ballast. So that's pretty much how I do it. Well, I kind of hoped that I would be able to do a demonstration of applying ballast and glue on the layout in this video, part 2 here of the ballasting video series. Unfortunately, there just wasn't time without making this another 20-minute video. So I'm going to break it in half here, and in 2 or 3 days, I'll upload video 3 in this series, in which I will show you from start to finish of the process of ballasting a section of track on my layout with cork road bed, and then adding the glue, letting it dry overnight, and then giving it a touch-up along the edges where some of the cork road bed was still showing through. So until then, keep watching the videos, and I hope you have a good week.